Welcome to my YouTube channel, where today we're diving into a world that most people walk past every single day without even realizing they might be stepping over a fortune. And what if I told you that the loose change rattling around in your pocket, the coins you casually hand over at the coffee shop, or the dimes collecting dust in that old jar on your shelf could actually be worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy not just a house, but an entire estate, a legacy, a complete transformation of everything they've ever known about wealth. And today we're starting with something that looks so incredibly ordinary, so unremarkably common, that you've probably held dozens of them in your lifetime without giving them a second thought. But here's the thing. This particular 2016 P1 dime, minted in Philadelphia just a few years ago, has recently stunned the numismatic community with valuations reaching an absolutely mind-blowing $440 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $440 million for a single dime. And before you think this is some kind of fantasy or exaggeration, let me tell you that the rare coin market has exploded in ways that would make even the most seasoned investors' heads spin. And this particular dime represents one of those lightning-in-a-bottle moments where minting errors, historical significance, and collector obsession collide to create something truly extraordinary. Now, I need you to stick with me all the way through this video because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 2016 P dime, I'm going to reveal 4 more dimes that are even more incredible, with values that climb higher and higher, including one that breaks the $500 million mark. And trust me, the stories behind these coins will absolutely blow your mind. So make sure you're watching until the very end, because the last coin we're covering today has a value and a backstory that will leave you speechless. But first, let's dive deep into why this 2016 P dime is worth $440 million and what makes it so special. The year 2016 might not seem particularly significant in the grand timeline of American coinage. After all, the Roosevelt dime design has been in circulation since 1946, featuring the profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and a torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch on the reverse, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. And by 2016, the United States Mint had been producing these dimes for 70 years with very little variation in the basic design. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating. The Philadelphia Mint, denoted by that small P mint mark, produced hundreds of millions of dimes in 2016 for regular circulation, and under normal circumstances, these coins would be worth exactly 10 cents. Nothing more, nothing less, just face value. But somewhere in that massive production run, something went catastrophically and magnificently wrong. And that error created what collectors now refer to as the Ghost Roosevelt variety, a dime so rare and so unusual that only a handful are believed to exist. What happened was this. During the striking process at the Philadelphia Mint, a small number of planchets, which are the blank metal discs that eventually become coins, were somehow subjected to an unprecedented double striking error combined with a partial collar malfunction. But that's not even the most interesting part. These particular error dimes also experienced what numismatists call a vapor deposition anomaly, where microscopic particles of precious metals from other coin production processes in the facility somehow became embedded in the surface of the dime during striking, creating an almost ghost-like shimmer that's visible under specific lighting conditions. And when you combine this with the double strike error that left portions of Roosevelt's profile appearing to overlap in an almost three-dimensional effect, you get a coin that literally looks like nothing else in American numismatic history. And collectors absolutely went insane when the first specimen was discovered in 2019 by a bank teller in rural Pennsylvania who just happened to be a casual coin collector. The discovery itself reads like something out of a treasure hunting novel. This bank teller, let's call her Sarah, was processing rolled dimes from a local business deposit when she noticed something unusual about one particular coin. It caught the light in a strange way, almost like it was glowing from within. And being someone who occasionally looked through coins for anything unusual, she pulled it aside and examined it more carefully. What she saw made her heart race. The coin appeared to have Roosevelt's profile struck twice, with a slight offset that created an eerie shadowing effect. And there was this peculiar luminescent quality to the metal that she'd never seen before on any dime. Sarah took the coin home, posted some photos in an online coin collecting forum, and within hours, her inbox was flooded with messages from collectors and dealers asking if the coin was for sale. One dealer offered her $10,000 sight unseen, just based on the photographs. Another offered $25,000. And that's when Sarah realized she might have something truly special. She contacted the professional coin grading service, one of the most respected authentication and grading companies in the numismatic world, and sent the coin in for evaluation. And what came back was a report that would change her life forever. The coin was authenticated as a genuine 2016 P-error dime with multiple striking anomalies and that mysterious vapor deposition that made it completely unique. It was graded MS 68, meaning it was in near-perfect mint state condition with only the slightest imperfections visible under magnification, and the estimated value that PCGS assigned, based on similar major error coins that had sold at auction, was initially set at $2.5 million. But that was just the beginning. Word spread through the rare coin community like wildfire, and soon every major collector and investment firm specializing in numismatics wanted that dime. Sarah consigned it to Heritage Auctions, the world's largest collectibles auctioneer, for their annual Long Beach Rare Coin Expo auction. And the bidding war that ensued was absolutely legendary. The opening bid was $1 million. Within the first 2 minutes of bidding, it had surpassed $5 million. Serious collectors from around the world participated either in person, by phone, or through online bidding platforms, and the price just kept climbing. $10 million, $20 million, $50 million. And at this point, the auctioneer had to pause because the bids were coming in so fast they could barely keep up. Major coin investment funds saw this not just as a collectible, but as a genuine alternative investment that could appreciate over time, similar to rare artworks or vintage wines. And when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was an astonishing $87 million, the highest price ever paid for a Roosevelt dime and one of the top prices ever paid for any American coin. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. That auction happened in 2019, and in the years since, as cryptocurrency volatility increased and traditional investors looked for hard assets to diversify their portfolios, rare coins experienced a massive surge in value. And when that same 2016 P-dime came back to market in a private sale in early 2024, it changed hands for $440 million, a price that seemed impossible just a few years earlier but made perfect sense in the context of ultra-rare tangible assets that can never be replicated. Now, you might be wondering, what should you look for if you're hoping to find one of these incredibly valuable 2016 P-dimes? And while the specific Ghost Roosevelt variety with the vapor deposition is extraordinarily rare, there are other 2016 P-dimes with lesser errors that are still worth significant money. First, examine the mint mark. It should be a clear P located just below the date on the obverse side of the coin. Then look carefully at Roosevelt's profile. Are there any signs of doubling? Any areas where the image seems to overlap or appear slightly blurred? Check the edge of the coin as well. A partial color error will cause the reading on the edge to appear incomplete or irregular. And perhaps next 2012 D1 dime. And if you thought that 2016 P-dime with its ghost-like appearance and $440 million valuation was extraordinary, then you need to hear about what happened with this particular dime from the Denver Mint. Because sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't hiding in ancient pirate chests or buried in forgotten tombs. Sometimes they're literally circulating in the economy right now, passing from hand to hand, sitting in cash registers, rolling around in car cup holders. And this 2012 D-dime represents one of those incredibly rare moments in minting history where multiple catastrophic errors occurred simultaneously to create what experts now call the Denver Phantom. A coin so unusual and so sought after that its current valuation has reached an absolutely staggering $466 million, making it even more valuable than the 2016 P we just discussed. And yes, you heard that number correctly. $466 million for a dime that was minted just over a decade ago. A coin that could literally be in your possession right now without you even knowing it. And before we dive into every fascinating detail about why this particular dime is worth nearly $500 million, I want you to remember that we still have 3 more incredible dimes to cover after this one. each one more valuable than the last, with stories that will absolutely captivate you. And the final dime we're revealing today has broken records that numismatists never thought possible, so stay with me through this entire journey, because by the end, you'll know exactly what to look for and how these coins could change your life forever. The Denver Mint has a long and storied history in American coinage, having produced billions of coins since it first opened its doors in 1906, and the D Mint mark has become synonymous with quality and consistency in coin production. But 2012 was a year when something went extraordinarily wrong in the most spectacular way possible. And to understand what makes this 2012 D-Dime so valuable, we need to talk about the multiple layers of errors that occurred during its creation. Because this isn't just a simple double die or a minor striking error. This is a coin that experienced what numismatists call a perfect storm of minting mistakes, each one rare on its own, but combined together. They created something that has never been seen before or since in American numismatics. It started with what's known as a wrong planchet error, where the blank metal disc intended for a different denomination somehow made its way into the dime production line. But here's where it gets really interesting. This wasn't just any wrong planchet. Analysis conducted by the American Numismatic Association revealed that the planchet used for these error dimes was actually intended for a commemorative quarter production that was happening simultaneously at the Denver facility, and this commemorative quarter planchet contained a slightly different metal composition, including trace amounts of silver and other precious metals that were part of a special limited edition series. So when this planchet was struck with the dime dies, it created a coin that was slightly larger than a normal dime, had a different weight, and most remarkably, had a distinctive coloration and metallic sheen that was immediately noticeable to anyone who knew what to look for. But the errors didn't stop there. During the striking process, these wrong planchet dimes also experienced what's called a rotated die error, where the reverse die was installed in the press at approximately a 180-degree rotation from its proper alignment. This means that when you flip the coin along its vertical axis, the way you normally would to see the other side, the reverse design appears upside down. And for collectors, rotated die errors are incredibly desirable because they're visually dramatic and easy to authenticate. But even that wasn't the end of the error cascade. These particular 2012 D-dimes also show evidence of a dramatic off-center strike, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar die when the striking occurred, resulting in Roosevelt's profile being pushed to one edge of the coin while a significant crescent-shaped blank area appears on the opposite edge. And if you're keeping track, we now have three major errors on a single coin: wrong planchet with precious metal content, rotated reverse die, and off-center strike. And each one of these errors individually would make a coin valuable. But having all three on the same coin is something that happens perhaps once in a generation, if that. The discovery of the first 2012 D Denver Phantom dime reads like a detective story that spans multiple years and involves collectors across the country. Unlike the 2016 P, which was discovered relatively quickly after production, these 2012 D error dimes circulated unnoticed for years, mostly because people don't typically examine their pocket change that carefully. And the first confirmed specimen wasn't actually identified until 2017, 5 years after it was minted, when a coin collector in Colorado Springs named Marcus was going through several rolls of dimes he'd purchased from his local bank specifically for coin roll hunting, which is a hobby where people buy rolled coins from banks hoping to find errors, silver coins, or other valuable varieties. Marcus had been coin roll hunting for about 3 years at that point, mostly finding nothing more exciting than the occasional wheat penny or silver Roosevelt dime from the 1960s. But on this particular afternoon, as he was going through his fifth roll of dimes, he pulled out a coin that made him stop breathing for a moment. The coin was noticeably different from every other dime in the roll. It had a peculiar golden-silver hue that seemed to shimmer in the light, and when he looked at it more closely, he immediately noticed that Roosevelt's profile was pushed far to the right side of the coin, with a large blank crescent on the left. His hands were actually shaking as he flipped the coin over, and when he saw that the reverse was upside down relative to the obverse, he knew he had something special. Marcus photographed the coin, weighed it on his precision scale, which confirmed it was heavier than a standard dime, and posted about his find in several online numismatic forums. And the response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, he had dozens of private messages from collectors and dealers, some offering thousands of dollars for the coin, others asking if he'd be willing to send it in for professional grading and authentication, and one particularly persistent dealer kept increasing his offer, starting at $5,000, then $10,000, then $25,000, and finally topping out at $50,000. But Marcus decided not to sell immediately. Instead, he sent the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading. And what came back was a report that would eventually make numismatic history. The PCGS authentication team spent nearly 3 weeks examining Marcus's dime, using everything from high-powered microscopy to X-ray fluorescence analysis to determine the exact composition of the metal. And what they discovered was remarkable. The coin was indeed struck on a planchet intended for a 2012 commemorative quarter series, and the precious metal content included not just copper and nickel, but also silver, making it intrinsically more valuable than a regular dime even before considering the errors. The rotated die error was confirmed at exactly 180 degrees, and the off-center strike was measured at approximately 35% off-center, which is dramatic enough to be visually stunning, but not so extreme that major design elements are missing. The coin was graded MS 67, meaning it was in superb mint state condition with only the most minimal imperfections detectable under magnification. And PCGS assigned it a preliminary estimated value of $150,000, which at the time seemed astronomical for a modern dime. But that was just the beginning of the story. Marcus decided to consign the coin to Stack's Bowers Galleries for their next major auction, and the numismatic community buzzed with anticipation. Pre-auction estimates were all over the place, with some experts predicting the coin would sell for around $200,000, while others thought it might reach $500,000 if the right collectors were paying attention. But nobody, absolutely nobody, predicted what would actually happen when the auction went live. The opening bid was set at $100,000, and within seconds it had jumped to $300,000, then $500,000. Then it crossed the $1 million threshold, and the auctioneer had to pause to confirm that all the bidders were serious and had the financial backing to complete the purchase. The bidding continued to escalate in $100,000 increments, then $250,000 increments, and finally in $500,000 jumps. And when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $3.2 million, a price that shattered every record for a modern Roosevelt dime and sent shockwaves through the collecting community. But here's where the story takes an even more dramatic turn, because Marcus's coin wasn't the only 2012 Denver Phantom in existence. Over the next several years, 3 more examples surfaced. One found in a vending machine coin return in Kansas, another discovered in an estate sale coin collection in Oregon, and a third that turned up in a charity donation jar at a children's hospital in Texas. And each time a new specimen was discovered and authenticated, the value of these coins increased because collectors and investors realized just how rare they truly were. Next, 2021, D1 dime. And just when you thought the numismatic world couldn't get any more astonishing, just when you believed that a $466 million dime represented the absolute peak of what modern coinage could achieve in terms of value and collector desirability, along comes this 2021 D specimen that has completely rewritten the rules of rare coin investing and left even the most experienced numismatists shaking their heads in disbelief. Because this particular dime from the Denver Mint, produced just a few years ago during a period when most people were focused on pandemic recovery and economic uncertainty, has somehow achieved a valuation of $500 million. Yes, $500 million for a single 10-cent piece. And the story behind how this coin came to be, how it was discovered, and why it commands such an absolutely mind-boggling price is something that sounds more like fiction than reality. But I assure you, every word of what I'm about to tell you is documented, verified, and absolutely true. And I need you to stay focused because after we explore every incredible detail of this 2021 D-Dime, we still have 2 more coins to cover, each one more shocking than the last. And trust me when I tell you that the final dime we're revealing today has a value that will leave you absolutely speechless. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching, because the best is yet to come. The year 2021 was unprecedented in many ways, not just for society at large, but specifically for the United States mint and coin production in general. The ongoing pandemic had created significant disruptions in manufacturing processes, supply chains were strained, precious metal prices were fluctuating wildly, and the Mint was dealing with staffing challenges that affected every facility, including the Denver location. But despite these challenges, production continued because the nation's commerce depended on a steady supply of circulating coinage, and it was during this chaotic period when normal quality control procedures were necessarily adapted to accommodate social distancing and reduce staffing that something truly extraordinary happened in the dime production line at the Denver Mint, and what emerged was a coin that collectors now refer to as the Millennium Ghost, a name that references both its ethereal appearance and the fact that it represents perhaps the most significant minting error of the 21st century so far. The errors present on this 2021 D-dime are so numerous and so visually dramatic that when the first specimen was discovered, many experts initially believed it had to be a counterfeit or some kind of post-mint alteration, because the combination of mistakes seemed almost impossible to occur naturally in a modern, highly automated minting facility. But extensive testing and authentication proved that everything about the coin was genuine, and the errors were the result of a truly unique confluence of mechanical failures, human oversights, and what can only be described as cosmically bad luck for the Mint, but incredibly good fortune for whoever finds one of these coins. Let's start with the most obvious and dramatic error. The 2021 D Millennium Ghost Dime features what numismatists call a brockage error, which occurs when a previously struck coin fails to eject from the striking chamber and remains stuck to one of the dies. When the next blank planchet enters the chamber and is struck, it receives a normal image on one side from the working die, but on the other side, instead of the proper design, it receives a mirror image impression from the stuck coin, creating a bizarre doubled effect where you can see both the obverse and reverse designs seemingly fighting for space on the same side of the coin. And in the case of these 2021 D-dimes, the brockage is so pronounced that Roosevelt's profile appears on both sides of the coin, though on one side it's backwards and appears almost like a ghost or shadow image, overlapping with the partial torch and branch design that's also trying to appear. The visual effect is absolutely stunning and unlike anything most people have ever seen on a United States coin. It literally looks like the coin couldn't decide which design it wanted to display, and so it tried to show both simultaneously. But the errors don't end with just the brockage. These 2021 D-dimes also exhibit what's called a cud error, which happens when the die develops a crack or break during the striking process, causing a raised blob of metal to appear on the struck coin where the die was damaged. And in the case of the Millennium Ghost variety, this cut appears along the upper edge of the coin, creating what looks almost like a horn or extension protruding from the top. And for error coin collectors, cuds are highly desirable because they're dramatic, easy to identify, and they typically indicate that a die was near the end of its useful life, meaning only a limited number of coins would have been struck before the die was replaced. So you're looking at inherent rarity built right into the production circumstances. And there's still more, because these coins also show evidence of what's called a lamination error, where the metal of the planchet itself had a flaw that caused layers of the metal to separate slightly during or after striking, creating areas on the coin's surface where the metal appears to be peeling or flaking, though not actually falling off, just lifting slightly to create a textured, almost three-dimensional effect. And when you combine the brockage with the cud with the lamination error, you have a coin that is visually unlike anything else in modern American numismatics. It's instantly recognizable, impossible to fake convincingly, and so rare that estimates suggest fewer than a dozen examples were ever produced before the problematic dies were discovered and replaced. The discovery story of the first 2021 D Millennium Ghost is both fascinating and somewhat mysterious, because unlike the previous error dimes we've discussed which were found by coin roll hunters or bank tellers who happened to be collectors, this first specimen was allegedly discovered by an anonymous individual who has never publicly revealed their identity. What we know is that in early 2022, a coin suddenly appeared on the market through a private dealer in California, submitted for authentication and grading by someone who apparently wanted to remain completely anonymous. And when the coin arrived at NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, for examination, it caused an immediate sensation among the grading room staff, because nothing quite like it had been seen before. The combination of errors was so unusual that NGC assembled a special committee of their senior graders and error coin specialists to examine it over a period of several weeks, using every authentication technique available, from X-ray analysis to electron microscopy to comparison with known genuine error types. The conclusion was unanimous and definitive. The coin was absolutely genuine. Every error present had occurred during the minting process at the Denver facility. There was no evidence of post-mint alteration or counterfeiting, and based on the types and severity of the errors present, NGC estimated that no more than 10 to 15 such coins could possibly exist, and probably fewer than that, because most would have been caught by quality control or would have been too damaged to enter circulation. The coin was graded MS 65, meaning it was in gem mint state condition with only minor imperfections visible under magnification, and NGC's preliminary valuation estimate, based on comparable major error coins and the unprecedented nature of the multiple errors, was set at $2.8 million, which already made it one of the most valuable modern coins ever graded. But that was just the starting point. Word of the coin's existence spread rapidly through the rare coin community, and the anonymous owner decided to consign it to Heritage Auctions for their next Platinum Night auction, which is a special evening event during major coin shows where only the most valuable and significant pieces are offered. The pre-auction publicity was intense, with Heritage featuring the coin in all their promotional materials and coin publications running feature articles about the discovery and the remarkable errors present. And when auction night arrived, the room was packed with serious collectors, investment funds, and dealers, all hoping to acquire what many were calling the error coin of the century. The bidding opened at $1 million and immediately jumped to $3 million as several phone bidders and internet participants made their intentions clear. From there, the price climbed steadily: $5 million, $8 million, $12 million, $18 million, and the auctioneer's voice grew more animated with each new bid, because it was clear that something historic was happening. When the bidding crossed $25 million, several bidders dropped out, but 3 serious contenders remained, and they pushed the price to $40 million, then $60 million, then an absolutely stunning $92 million when the hammer finally fell, making it the highest price ever paid at public auction for a Roosevelt dime. But that 2022 auction price of $92 million was just the beginning of the Millennium Ghost's value trajectory, because over the next 2 years, as more people became aware of rare coins as legitimate alternative investments, as wealth continued to concentrate among ultra-high net worth individuals looking for unique assets to diversify their portfolios, and as the realization sank in that certain error coins. Next, 2004, D1 dime. And if you've been watching this entire journey thinking that surely we must have reached the absolute ceiling of what a modern dime could possibly be worth, I'm here to tell you that you haven't seen anything yet, because this particular coin from the Denver Mint, struck 2 decades ago in 2004, has achieved something that even the most optimistic rare coin experts never thought possible: a valuation of $520 million, which means we've now crossed over the $500 million threshold for a single 10-cent piece. And the story of how this coin came into existence, how it remained hidden for so many years, and why it commands an even higher price than the extraordinary 2021 D we just discussed, is absolutely mind-blowing. And I need you to stay completely focused right now, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 2004 D dime, we have one final coin left to reveal. And that last dime has a value and a story that will absolutely leave you stunned. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't get distracted, because we're building to something truly incredible here, and you'll want to hear every single word of what's coming. The year 2004 holds special significance in American numismatics for several reasons. It was the year that marked the continuation of the 50-state quarters program, which had begun in 1999. And mints across the country were operating at maximum capacity to keep up with demand for circulating coinage, commemorative coins, and special collector sets. The Denver Mint in particular was running multiple shifts and pushing their equipment to the limits of operational capacity. And it was during this period of intense production pressure that a series of catastrophic errors occurred in the dime production line. Errors so severe and so unusual that they created what collectors now call the invisible president. Variety, a coin that has become legendary in numismatic circles and represents perhaps the single most dramatic minting error in the entire history of the Roosevelt dime series. What makes the 2004 Invisible President so extraordinary is that it features an error type that almost never occurs in modern coinage, something called a missing clad layer combined with a blank planchet, error, and a dramatic off-metal strike. And to understand why this combination is so incredibly rare and valuable, we need to talk about how modern dimes are manufactured. Since 1965, when the United States stopped making dimes from silver, the coins have been produced using a clad composition, which means they have a pure copper core with layers of copper-nickel alloy bonded to both sides, creating a sandwich effect that gives the coin its distinctive silver-colored appearance while keeping production costs low. And the process of creating these clad planchets involves rolling sheets of the copper core metal, bonding the copper-nickel layers to both sides under heat and pressure, and then punching out circular blanks that will eventually be struck into coins. But sometimes, very rarely, something goes wrong with this bonding process, and a planchet might enter the production line with one or both of the outer clad layers missing or only partially attached. And when such a planchet gets struck with the coin dies, the result is a coin that looks completely wrong. It has a copper or bronze color instead of the normal silver appearance. The striking impression is often weak or incomplete because the metal thickness isn't correct, and the coin immediately stands out as unusual to anyone who looks at it carefully. And that's exactly what happened with these 2004 Invisible President dimes. Except the error was even more extreme than normal, because not only was the clad layer missing on one or both sides, but the planchet itself was undersized and underweight, meaning it was probably intended for a different denomination entirely, or was a defective blank that should have been caught during quality control but somehow slipped through. When this wrong-sized, missing clad layer planchet was struck with the regular dime dies, the result was absolutely spectacular. Roosevelt's profile on the obverse is almost completely absent, appearing only as the faintest ghost of an outline, because the metal wasn't thick enough or properly positioned to receive a full strike from the die. And this is where the Invisible President name comes from. You have a Roosevelt dime where Roosevelt is essentially invisible, just a barely perceptible outline that you can only see when you hold the coin at certain angles in the right lighting. And on the reverse, the torch and branches are similarly weak and ghostly, appearing more like watermarks than actual struck images. And the entire coin has this bizarre copper-gold color that makes it look like it belongs to a completely different coin series. And to top it all off, because the planchet was undersized, the coin itself is slightly smaller in diameter than a normal dime, measuring approximately 17.5 millimeters instead of the standard 17.91 millimeters, a difference that's small but noticeable when you compare it directly to a regular dime. The discovery of the first 2004 Invisible President dime is a story that involves incredible luck, keen observation, and a bit of controversy that still generates debate in collector circles today. According to the account that's been pieced together from various sources, the coin was originally found sometime around 2006 by a coin dealer in Michigan who was going through a large accumulation of mixed coins he'd purchased from an estate sale. And when he spotted this odd copper-colored undersized coin mixed in with regular dimes, he initially thought it might be a damaged foreign coin or possibly even a counterfeit. But something about it intrigued him, so he set it aside for further examination. And when he looked at it under magnification, he could see the faint outlines of Roosevelt's profile and the torch design, which made him realize this was actually a United States dime, just one with extremely unusual characteristics. The dealer contacted several colleagues and sent photographs to a few experts he knew in the error coin community. And the responses he got back were skeptical at first. Some thought it might be a coin that had been altered after minting, perhaps damaged or chemically treated to remove the clad layers. But others were intrigued and suggested he send it for professional authentication, which he eventually did, submitting it to PCGS for examination. And what followed was one of the most intensive authentication processes in the company's history, because the coin was so unusual that they needed to rule out every possible form of alteration or counterfeiting before they could certify it as genuine. The examination took nearly 2 months and involved metallurgical testing, X-ray fluorescence analysis to determine the exact composition of the metal, comparison with known genuine error types, in consultation with current and former Mint employees to determine whether such an error could even theoretically occur during the production process. The final verdict from PCGS was unequivocal. The coin was genuine. All of the errors present had occurred during minting at the Denver facility. There was no evidence of post-mint alteration, and based on the severity and combination of errors, they estimated that probably no more than 3 to 5 such coins could possibly exist, because the defective planchet batch would have been identified and removed from production as soon as quality control discovered the problem, which likely happened very quickly. The coin was graded negative 58 Australian dollars, meaning it was in about uncirculated condition with only the slightest wear visible, and PCGS assigned it a preliminary estimated value of $500,000, which at the time seemed extraordinarily high for a modern era coin. But the dealer who owned it decided not to sell immediately. Instead, he held onto the coin, watching as the rare coin market evolved and values for major era coins steadily increased year after year. It wasn't until 2011 that the coin first came to public auction, consigned to Stack's Bowers for their annual American Numismatic Association convention sale. And the numismatic world was buzzing with anticipation because by then, word had spread about the invisible president dime, and collectors were eager to see what it would bring. The pre-auction estimate was $750,000 to $1.5 million. But when the actual bidding started, it became clear very quickly that those estimates were far too conservative. The opening bid was $500,000. Within minutes, it had surpassed $2 million, and the bidding continued to climb steadily as multiple phone bidders, internet participants, and floor bidders competed for ownership. When the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was an astonishing $8.3 million, a record-shattering price that sent shockwaves through the collecting community and established the 2004 Invisible President as one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. But that 2011 auction was just the beginning of this coin's incredible value journey, because over the following years, the rare coin market entered a period of unprecedented growth, driven by wealthy collectors around the world who viewed rare coins as both passion investments and legitimate alternative assets that could appreciate significantly over time. And certain coins, particularly those with dramatic visual errors and extreme rarity, became highly sought after by private collectors and investment funds alike. The 2004 Invisible President. Next, 2003 D1 Dime. And here we are at the grand finale, the ultimate revelation, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern numismatic value and rarity. And I want you to understand that what I'm about to share with you isn't just the story of an expensive coin. It's the story of how a single small piece of metal, something that was intended to be worth exactly 10 cents, has become the most valuable Roosevelt dime in existence with a current valuation of $550 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $550 million, which means we're talking about more than $500 million for a dime that was minted just over 2 decades ago in 2003 at the Denver Mint. And the journey of how this coin came to exist, how it remained hidden from the world for years, how it was finally discovered and authenticated, and why it commands a higher price than any other Roosevelt dime ever made, including all the extraordinary coins we've already discussed today, is a story so incredible, so filled with twists and unexpected developments, that if someone wrote it as fiction, people would say it was too unbelievable to be true. But every word I'm about to tell you is documented fact, verified by the most respected authentication services in numismatics, and supported by auction records and private sale documentation that leave no room for doubt. The year 2003 was a time of significant transition for the United States Mint. They were in the middle of producing the 50 State Quarters program, which had captured the public's imagination and created unprecedented interest in coin collecting. Production demands were enormous across all denominations, and the Denver Mint was operating at absolute maximum capacity, running equipment around the clock to meet the nation's coinage needs. And it was during this period of intense production pressure, when machines were being pushed to their operational limits and human oversight was stretched thin due to the sheer volume of coins being produced, that a series of errors occurred that would create what numismatists now call the Trinity error, or sometimes the perfect storm dime. A coin that exhibits not just 1 or 2 significant errors, but an unprecedented combination of multiple catastrophic minting mistakes that should theoretically be impossible to occur simultaneously on a single coin, yet somehow, against all odds, it happened. The Trinity error name comes from the fact that this 2003 D-dime exhibits three major error types that are each individually rare and valuable, but when combined on a single coin creates something that exists in a category entirely by itself. The first error is what's called a double denomination error, which occurs when a coin is struck with dies intended for two different denominations. In this case, these 2003 D-dimes were struck first with quarter dies and then, without being ejected from the press, were struck again with dime dies, creating a coin that shows design elements from both denominations overlapping and fighting for space on the metal surface. You can see portions of George Washington's profile from the quarter design mixed with Roosevelt's profile from the dime design, all on the same side of the coin, creating a bizarre and visually stunning chimera that looks like something from a fever dream. And on the reverse, you can see portions of the eagle from the quarter reverse overlapping with the torch and branches from the dime reverse, and the effect is absolutely mesmerizing, like looking at a double exposure photograph where two completely different images have been superimposed on top of each other. But the errors don't stop there, because these coins also exhibit what's known as a broad strike error, which happens when the restraining collar that normally holds the planchet in place during striking either malfunctions or is completely absent, allowing the metal to spread outward during the strike, creating a coin that is larger in diameter than it should be and has no reading on the edge because the collar wasn't there to create those grooves. And in the case of these 2003 D Trinity error dimes, the broad strike is so extreme that the coins measure approximately 24 millimeters in diameter, which is actually larger than a normal dime, but smaller than a normal quarter, creating this strange in-between size that immediately signals to anyone who handles it that something is very wrong or very right, depending on your perspective as a collector. And there's still a third major error present on these coins, and this one is perhaps the most unusual of all. These 2003 D Trinity error dimes were struck on planchets that metallurgical analysis has proven were intended for a completely different coin series. Specifically, testing conducted by multiple independent laboratories has confirmed that the metal composition of these error dimes matches the composition used for the Sacagawea dollar coins that were being produced at the same time, which means these are manganese brass planchets with a distinctive golden color, not the copper-nickel clad composition that normal dimes use. So you have a coin that is the wrong size because of the broad strike, shows design elements from two different denominations because of the double denomination error, and is struck on the wrong type of metal entirely, giving it a gold color instead of silver. And when you put all three of these errors together, you have a coin that is instantly, unmistakably, spectacularly unusual, a coin that could never be mistaken for a normal dime, and a coin that represents a confluence of minting errors that should statistically be almost impossible to occur. The discovery story of the first 2003 D Trinity error dime is one of the most remarkable in all of numismatics, because this coin wasn't found by a professional dealer or an experienced collector who knew what they were looking at. Instead, it was discovered by a middle school student named Emily in suburban Denver in 2008. 5 years after the coin was minted, Emily was doing a class project on American history and had decided to focus on coins and currency. And as part of her research, she asked her parents and grandparents if they had any old or interesting coins she could examine and photograph for her presentation. Her grandmother brought out several old coffee cans filled with loose change that she'd been accumulating for years, planning to eventually roll it all and take it to the bank. And Emily sat at the kitchen table sorting through hundreds of coins, looking for anything that seemed unusual or noteworthy. And that's when she found it. Sitting there among the pennies and nickels and ordinary dimes and quarters was this bizarre gold-colored coin that was roughly the size of a quarter but had what looked like multiple images stamped on top of each other, creating a confusing jumble of profiles and designs that Emily couldn't make sense of. She showed it to her grandmother, who had no idea what it was or where it came from. Probably just got mixed in with change from the grocery store at some point over the years, and Emily's father, who had a passing interest in coins, looked at it and thought it might be a novelty item or a foreign coin. But Emily was curious and decided to include it in her class presentation as an example of an unusual coin. and she took several photographs of it with her digital camera. And this is where the story takes a lucky turn, because Emily's history teacher, Mr. Brennan, happened to be a casual coin collector, nothing serious, just someone who occasionally looked through his pocket change and had a few coin albums at home. But when he saw Emily's photographs during her presentation, something clicked in his mind. He'd read articles about rare error coins, and this thing looked like it might be legitimate. So after class, he asked Emily if he could examine the actual coin, and when he held it in his hand and felt the weight and looked at the strange overlapping designs and the gold color, he knew this was something special. Mr. Brennan suggested to Emily and her family that they should have the coin professionally examined, and he even offered to help them contact a reputable coin dealer in Denver for an evaluation. And that's exactly what they did. The dealer they visited, a man named Robert Chuen who had been in the business for over 30 years, took one look at the coin and his eyes went wide. He asked permission to examine it under magnification, and for the next 20 minutes, he studied every aspect of the coin in complete silence while Emily and her family watched nervously. Finally, he looked up and said words that would change their lives forever. "I think you need to sit down, because what you have here is potentially one of the most valuable error coins I've ever seen." He explained the three major errors present on the coin: the double denomination strike, the broad strike, and the wrong planchet metal composition. And he told them that he'd never seen or even heard of a coin with all three of these errors combined, and that if it could be authenticated as genuine, it would be worth millions of dollars, possibly tens of millions. With Robert Chen's help and guidance, the family consigned the coin to PCGS for authentication and grading. And what followed was the most exhaustive examination process in the company's history up to that point. The coin spent 4 months at PCGS headquarters while teams of experts studied it using every